I invite you to listen to the story of the day a junior sommelier threw vintage red wine on my scarf and loudly proclaimed her husband was the director of this estate. I calmly called my husband. "You need to come down here and see this. Your new wife is throwing wine on me." The private jet touched down heavily on the runway at Napa County Airport. After a grueling 14-hour flight from Bordeaux, the roar of the engines gradually subsided, returning a quiet stillness to the cabin. I closed the book I'd been reading. Let's rewind a little. To just a few hours before that chaotic moment. The drive through Napa Valley is always breathtaking. The golden afternoon sun draped over the rolling hills, casting a warm glow on the endless rows of grapevines. This was Silver Oak Estates. My name is Eleanor Vance, and I am 32 years old. To the outside world, I am the ultimate authority here, the sole owner and heiress to a billion-dollar wine empire built by my late father. But the world doesn't see the crushing weight of this glittering legacy. Since his passing, I've had to navigate a boardroom full of ruthless investors, all while trying to maintain the illusion of a perfect marriage. I had just returned from a grueling, month-long business trip to Bordeaux, France. I had to personally inspect the vineyards and negotiate the acquisition of rare European vines to elevate our next vintage. This massive responsibility should have fallen to my husband, Julian Cross, the man currently holding the title of Chief Operating Officer. But I knew his capabilities all too well. Julian was charming, devastatingly handsome, and a master at networking with wealthy clients in the tasting room. But when it came to the actual science of viticulture, the dirt, the soil, the complex negotiations with French traditionalists, he was completely out of his depth. Out of love and a desperate desire to protect his pride, I had agreed to work from the shadows. I handled the heavy lifting so he could wear the crown. My private car dropped me off at the edge of the estate. I didn't want a grand entrance. I told the driver to leave my luggage at the gatehouse, wearing simple, unassuming clothes, a plain blouse and a vintage silk scarf my father gave me. I walked up the gravel path. I wanted to see the daily operations of Silver Oak through the eyes of an ordinary visitor. I needed to know how Julian was running my family's legacy while I was away. Then the estate was divided into two distinct worlds. I stepped quietly toward the lower cellars first. The air down there was cool, thick with the intoxicating rich scent of fermented grapes and aged French oak. And there, standing amidst towering wooden barrels, was Lucas Thorne. Lucas was our master winemaker, a brilliant mind who practically grew up in the soil of this valley. He was currently dealing with a critical temperature fluctuation in our most expensive reserve. Sweat beaded on his forehead, staining the collar of his work shirt. His hands, stained purple from the harvest, moved with practiced, gentle precision as he checked the pressure valves. He was so intensely focused on saving the vintage that he didn't even notice me watching him. Lucas hadn't changed in 15 years. He was a true artisan, to a soul shining brightly in an industry increasingly obsessed with flashy marketing and hollow prestige. Seeing his quiet dedication, a profound sense of gratitude washed over me. But that beautiful image of pure passion was instantly shattered the moment I walked up the stone stairs and entered the VIP tasting room. The main hall was a marvel of modern architecture, featuring floor-to-ceiling glass that overlooked the entire valley. The faint hum of classical music played in the background, but cutting through that refined atmosphere was a shrill, piercing voice. "Hey, are you blind? Look what you just did." I froze. Standing in the center of the polished marble floor was a young woman of about 22. She wore a tight, plunging dress that was wildly inappropriate for a prestigious sommelier, or revealing far too much skin for a professional setting. Pinned to her chest was a silver badge that read, "Chloe, Junior Sommelier." Her face was contoured with heavy makeup, and she stood with her hands on her hips, her voice echoing off the expensive glass walls. And the target of her venom was Matteo. Mateo was an elderly field worker, a gentle man whose face was lined with decades of hard labor under the California sun. He had worked for my father since before I was born. He was holding a massive, heavy wooden crate of freshly harvested grapes, his arms trembling slightly from the weight. Some dust from his work boots had accidentally brushed against the edge of a pristine white rug. "I am so sorry, miss," Mateo stammered, his head bowed in genuine distress. "The crates are just so heavy today I didn't see the edge of the mat." "I'll clean it up right away." Chloe didn't even look at him. She scoffed loudly, waving a perfectly manicured hand in the air in sheer disgust. "Clean it up? You're tracking disgusting dirt all over my tasting room. How does someone like you even work at a luxury estate like this? You move like a snail and you smell like a barn. Get out of my sight before I tell Julian to fire you." Having finished berating the old man, Chloe immediately pulled out her phone, flipped her hair, and her entire demeanor completely transformed. Her vicious scowl melted into a sickeningly sweet smile as she started a live stream. "Hi guys, welcome back to my glamorous life at the vineyard. Ugh, I just had to deal with the most incompetent, dirty staff member. But you know your girl Chloe always keeps it classy and fabulous. Tap that heart, babes." I stood by the grand mahogany doors, my heart pounding in my chest. A vein throbbed in my temple. Was this the standard of excellence Julian swore he would uphold? Was this the culture my father and I had bled into this soil to build? A vain, cruel girl live-streaming her arrogance while humiliating a loyal elder. I clenched my fists. The stark contrast was nauseating. Lucas down in the cellar, sweating to preserve our legacy. And this vapid girl upstairs, poisoning it. I took a deep, steadying breath, letting the cold calm of a true leader wash over me, and stepped out of the shadows. I stepped forward, my low heels making a quiet but firm sound against the marble floor. I walked over to Mateo, gently placing a hand on his trembling shoulder to reassure him. He flinched, then looked up, his weathered eyes widening as he recognized me. He opened his mouth to greet me as the owner, but I quickly put a finger to my lips. I needed to see exactly how far this delusion would go. I turned to face the young woman. "Excuse me," I said, my voice quiet but carrying the unmistakable weight of authority. "This is a place of craftsmanship and hospitality, not a stage for you to berate your elders. He made an honest mistake. There is absolutely no need to speak to him like that." Chloe blinked, clearly completely taken aback that someone had dared to interrupt her performance. She lowered her phone, her eyes narrowing as she scanned me from head to toe with a look of pure disgust. I was wearing a simple, unbranded blouse and minimal makeup after a 14-hour flight. To a flashy, label-obsessed girl like her, I was probably just some unremarkable tourist, or a tired middle-aged Karen. "And who exactly are you to tell me how to do my job?" Chloe sneered, her voice dripping with venom. "I am correcting a lazy employee. If you have a problem with it, the exit is right there. Do not interrupt my stream." Without missing a beat, she raised her phone again, shoving the camera directly into my face. Her voice instantly pitched up into that grating, fake sweet tone. "Oh my God, guys. Look at this. My day is literally being ruined by some bitter, jealous woman. She just came out of nowhere and started attacking me for trying to keep our luxury estate clean. Poor Chloe, always getting bullied by these miserable nobodies. The sheer audacity was almost fascinating. My initial plan was just to issue a quiet reprimand and let human resources handle her termination later. But this level of disrespect, this blatant cruelty, demanded something more. "Put the phone down now," I said, my gaze locking onto hers, cold and unflinching. "You are violating estate policy, and you are harassing a senior worker. If you do not stop this instant, I will have security escort you out." "Ooh, are you threatening me?" Chloe gasped, her heavily contoured face twisting into an ugly sneer. Suddenly, She reached for a crystal glass resting on the tasting counter. It was filled to the brim with our most expensive, darkest vintage reserve. She pretended to stumble on her high heels, but the movement was entirely deliberate. With a violent flick of her wrist, she hurled the dark red wine directly at my chest. The cold liquid splashed violently against me, immediately soaking into the delicate fabric of my blouse. But worse, on it drenched the vintage Hermes silk scarf draped around my neck. The dark, blood-like stain spread rapidly across the pale silk. This scarf was the very last birthday gift my father had given me before he passed away. And now, it was ruined by the calculated cruelty of a spoiled child. "Oh my gosh, I am so clumsy," Chloe shrieked, bursting into a theatrical wail. "Look what you made me do. You stepped right into my way." She sobbed into her camera, glancing at the screen to make sure her followers were watching her Oscar-worthy performance. She then stepped closer to me, leaning in so only I could hear her true voice. "You better get down on your knees and apologize to me right now, or I will ruin you. Do you have any idea who my husband is? My husband is Julian Cross, the director of this entire estate. He owns this place. You mess with me, and I will have him throw you out into the street." Hearing Julian's name fall from her lips felt like a physical blow to my chest. My husband, the man I had sacrificed everything to protect, he was using the empire my father built to play God with his young mistress. I looked down at the dark wine dripping from my ruined scarf, and in that moment psychology offered a startling clarity. In psychology, there is a concept known as reflected power. It happens when someone completely powerless confuses their proximity to authority with actually possessing it. Chloe was just a junior employee, but she was living under the delusion that she was the queen of the valley, simply because she shared a bed with the director. Her arrogance toward Mateo, hurling wine at a stranger, it didn't stem from real confidence. And it was born from a deep, hollow insecurity. People who wear borrowed power always have to scream the loudest. They have to put on a terrifying, aggressive show to hide a pathetic, undeniable truth. Without the man standing behind her, she was absolutely nothing. The tragedy of borrowed power is that it always has an expiration date, and the price of returning it is profound humiliation. I didn't explode with rage. I didn't scream back. I simply pulled a handkerchief from my bag, wiped the red wine from my cheek, and looked at her. The dark red liquid dripped heavily from the hem of my blouse, pooling quietly onto the pristine marble floor. The lively chatter of the VIP tasting room died instantly. The elegant clinking of crystal glasses simply stopped. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd, sharp and eager. I could feel the weight of dozens of eyes turning toward us. Wealthy clients, investors, and terrified staff members watching the scene unfold. Through the corner of my eye, I saw the undeniable glow of smartphone screens lifting into the air. People were recording. Chloe stood there, her hands resting firmly on her hips, a triumphant, ugly smirk playing on her lips. She was waiting for me to snap. She wanted a screaming match, a hysterical, pathetic scene she could broadcast to her followers to prove that I was the crazy one and she was the untouchable queen of the estate. Instead, I gave her nothing, absolutely nothing. I stood perfectly still, as calm and unreadable as a deep winter lake. The cold wine seeped completely through the delicate silk of my father's scarf, carrying the sharp, acidic bite of fermented grapes. In that fleeting second, I caught a glimpse of my own reflection in the towering glass windows overlooking the valley. To anyone else in this room, I looked like a pathetic, defeated woman who had just been publicly humiliated by a younger, prettier girl. Deep inside the pocket of my slacks, my phone vibrated twice. It was a secure, urgent message from the head of estate security. "Madam, we have visual on the disturbance in the main hall. Dispatching the guards right now." I kept my hand buried in my pocket, my fingers blindly typing a quick, steady reply. "Stop. Stand down." No one intervenes until I give the direct order. Most people in my position would have let their pride take over. They would think that a woman with my immense wealth and ultimate authority should never, ever stand in a public room and endure such blatant, disgusting disrespect. With a single snap of my fingers, I could have had a team of armed guards drag this arrogant girl out by her hair, silencing her completely and erasing her from my property. But I knew better. True power doesn't need to scream to be heard. And dealing with a massive, deeply rooted parasite like Julian required far more than a quiet, polite dismissal in a private boardroom. Julian wasn't just a cheating husband. He was the chief operating officer of a billion-dollar wine empire. He'd spent years charming our oldest investors, building quiet alliances, and carefully crafting the perfect public image of a visionary, ethical leader. If I simply fired him behind closed doors, he would immediately spin the narrative. He would play the absolute victim, rally the board members, and claim I was just a jealous, emotional, hysterical wife who was destroying the company over a personal dispute. No. To completely excise a tumor, you have to drag it out into the harsh, unforgiving light of day. I needed this public spectacle. I needed the shocked gasps of our top-tier clients. I needed the dozens of smartphones recording every single second of this pathetic display. More importantly, I needed the high-definition security cameras mounted on the ceiling to capture an undeniable, unspinnable record of his mistress's true, vile nature and his own impending cowardice. This silence, this agonizing, heavy silence that was suffocating the room, was not a sign of weakness. It was an invisible, inescapable net I was carefully casting over them. I was more than willing to let my favorite clothes be ruined. I was entirely willing to let this beautiful silk scarf, the very last memory I had of my father, bear this ugly dark stain. If it meant saving his life's work from rotting away from the inside. The whispers in the room grew louder, thick with tension and confusion. Chloe's triumphant smirk began to falter, just a fraction. My absolute lack of reaction was deeply unnerving her. She expected tears. She expected blind rage. She didn't know how to handle the terrifying stillness of a predator, simply waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "Are you deaf? I told you to get on your knees and apologize to me," she shrieked again, though her voice had noticeably lost a bit of its confident edge. I slowly pulled my hand from my pocket, wiping a drop of red wine from my chin with slow, deliberate grace. I looked at her, not with anger, but with the cold and distant pity you might give to an insect right before crushing it. "You want me to speak to your husband," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, yet carrying crystal clear through the dead silent room. "Let's do exactly that." I calmly unlocked my screen and scrolled to the contact name that used to bring me warmth. Julian. The sharp ring of the elevator bell sliced through the heavy silence of the tasting room. The polished steel doors slid open, and Julian burst out. He looked like he had run a marathon in a three-piece suit. His expensive silk tie was skewed, his chest heaving, and a sheen of cold sweat coated his forehead. He had completely lost that charismatic, polished demeanor he always used to charm our clients. He frantically scanned the room, his eyes wide with panic. They landed on Chloe first. She was standing there, the empty wine glass still near her hand, looking like a wounded, misunderstood princess. Julian completely froze for a split second. But then his gaze shifted and met mine. I was standing perfectly still, the dark wine still dripping steadily from my silk scarf onto the floor, my eyes locked on him with the cold precision of a sniper. Julian knew in that exact moment that his entire reign was over. But Chloe, completely blind to the terrifying shift in the atmosphere, saw Julian as her ultimate savior. She shed her fake pride, practically throwing herself across the room and clinging tightly to his arm, whining in that high-pitched, grating voice. "Julian, baby, you are finally here. You have to do something. This crazy woman just attacked me out of nowhere. She is completely ruining my live stream. Oh, you need to call security and have her thrown off our property right now." Julian stood rigid. His arm was completely stiff in her grasp. He just stared at me, his lips moving silently, unable to form a single word. Absolute terror was etched into every line of his face. He knew better than anyone else in this room that the woman standing before him with ruined clothes was not just his wife. She was the sole owner, the one who held his fate, his title, and his entire luxurious lifestyle in the palm of her hand. "Well, Julian," I prompted, my voice calm, but my lips curling into a smile that made him physically shudder. "What is the matter, Director Cross? Your beloved is crying for justice. Aren't you going to do something about it?" Chloe, sensing his strange hesitation, shook his arm harder, her voice rising in frustration. "Julian, what is wrong with you? Say something. Everyone is watching us. You have to show them who is the boss here." Julian finally turned his head to look at Chloe, and the look in his eyes. It was no longer the soft, adoring gaze of a lover. It was pure, unadulterated hatred. He realized that this stupid, arrogant girl had just lit the fuse on the bomb that was about to obliterate his entire life. And then, it happened. Smack! A sharp, explosive sound echoed off the high glass walls of the tasting room. Julian swung his arm with vicious force, delivering a brutal slap directly across Chloe's face. The sheer force of the blow sent her staggering backward. Her high heels twisted, and she fell hard onto the polished marble floor. Her phone flew from her hand, skittering across the tiles, the live stream still running, or broadcasting the entire humiliating scene to her followers. Chloe clutched her cheek, a bright red imprint already forming on her pale skin. She looked up at Julian, her eyes wide with absolute disbelief. She couldn't process what was happening. The man who, just last night, had sworn his undying love and promised to buy her a new sports car, was now striking her in front of hundreds of people. "Shut your mouth!" Julian screamed, his voice cracking violently with a mix of fear and raw rage. "What the hell are you talking about? I do not know you. You are completely insane. Stop spreading these lies about me." The entire tasting room gasped collectively. The reversal was shocking, brutal, and utterly pathetic. Julian immediately turned back to me, his aggressive, terrifying demeanor vanishing in a single second. It was replaced by a groveling, desperate expression. He clasped his hands together, his voice shaking so badly he could barely speak. "Eleanor, honey, please, let me explain. I honestly have no idea who she is. She must be some obsessed fan or some delusional stalker trying to get attention. Please, you have to believe me. You are my only wife." I watched his pathetic performance with a rising, sickening wave of nausea. This right here, this was the brutal truth behind the psychology of a narcissist. His action was not just the panic of a cheating husband caught red-handed. It was a pure, unfiltered survival instinct. To a man with narcissistic personality disorder like Julian, the people around him, whether it was the wife who had protected him for 10 years or the Youngs, a beautiful mistress he showered with gifts, were never actual human beings. They were just tools. They existed solely to serve his ego and his interests. And the moment a tool, like Chloe, became a threat to his core survival, the moment she jeopardized his billion-dollar CEO title, his instinct was to immediately discard and destroy her without a single ounce of hesitation. That violent slap was the most honest thing he had done all day. It exposed the cold, blood-chilling reality of a man who cheats purely out of greed. Never expect true love or loyalty from a man who is willing to trample over his own family, because when the storm finally hits, The only person a narcissist will ever protect is himself. I walked slowly toward the center of the tasting room. Weren't the steady click of my heels against the marble floor sounded like the measured strike of a judge's gavel. I didn't stop until I was standing on the slightly elevated platform where our most exclusive reserve bottles were displayed. I turned to face the crowd, looking out over the sea of shocked faces, whispering staff, and my now trembling, pathetic excuse for a husband. To all our esteemed guests and dedicated staff present here today, I began, my voice clear and ringing with absolute authority. I am Eleanor Vance, the sole owner and heiress of Silver Oak Estates. I apologize that you had to witness this deeply disgraceful scene on my property today. A collective gasp went up from the crowd. The realization hit them like a physical wave. The woman with the stained, unbranded clothes. The woman who had just been publicly berated and assaulted with wine by a junior employee was the queen of the entire valley. I looked directly at Julian. All traces of the affection I once held for him were completely gone, replaced by a cold, surgical detachment. Julian was literally shaking, his face drained of all color. He fell to his knees, ignoring the pain as they hit the hard marble, desperately grabbing the hem of my wine-stained blouse. "Eleanor, honey, please. I was wrong. I made a terrible, stupid mistake. Please, for the sake of everything we've built, just forgive me this one time. I swear I'll never see her again. I will do anything, just please do not do this." I looked down at the man kneeling at my feet without a single shred of pity. Just then, my personal lawyer, Arthur, emerged from the crowd, and he was impeccably dressed, holding a thick, heavy leather folder. He walked up to the platform, bowed his head respectfully to me, and handed over the files. "Madam, here are the complete bank statements, the loan agreements, and the security footage you requested, all legally obtained." I took the thick file and stared at it for a brief second. Then, with a swift, forceful motion, I threw the entire folder directly at Julian's face. The heavy papers scattered violently across the marble floor, exposing the naked, ugly truth for every single person in the room to see. "Read it," I commanded, my voice dropping to a terrifying, quiet register. "Read it out loud, Julian. Let everyone see exactly what you have been doing behind my back." Julian stared at the scattered papers, his eyes widening in absolute horror. He didn't say a word. He couldn't. "You swore to me that you were expanding our operations while I was in France," I said, taking a slow step down toward him. "You told me those late-night meetings were for negotiating new distribution channels. So, tell me, Julian, why are there massive wire transfers to an offshore shell company linked to the Bellagio in Las Vegas?" Julian sputtered, sweat pouring down his ashen face. "Eleanor, that was an investment, a private investment for a new marketing firm. The paperwork just hasn't cleared yet. You are misunderstanding everything." "An investment?" I scoffed, a bitter, hollow sound that made him flinch. I leaned down, picking up a specific document bearing a bright red wax seal. I held it up so the entire room could see the official legal header. "Then explain this, Julian." Explain why my lawyer just handed me a secret collateral agreement. Explain to me, and to every hardworking employee in this room, how you dared to secretly mortgage the original founding vineyards of Silver Oak Estates to a rival conglomerate just to cover your massive gambling debts. The entire tasting room erupted. The wealthy investors in the crowd looked absolutely appalled. The staff members who had dedicated their lives to tending those vines stared at Julian with pure, unadulterated disgust. He hadn't just cheated on his wife. He had gambled away the very soil they stood on. He had bet their livelihoods on a roulette table. Julian slumped forward, burying his face in his hands. He knew he was completely, utterly defeated. The magnitude of his betrayal was fully exposed, stripping away the polished mask he had worn for 10 years, revealing the greedy, hollow monster underneath. Julian scrambled to his feet, desperately trying to salvage whatever dignity he had left. His eyes darted around the room, meeting the cold, unforgiving stares of the staff and clients. "Eleanor, please," he stammered, his voice laced with a pathetic, fabricated sense of victimhood. "You can't just throw out accusations based on some unverified paperwork. This is all a huge misunderstanding. The collateral agreement, it was a last-minute contingency for the new barrel room expansion, a standard financial procedure. It just hasn't been properly filed yet." He turned to the crowd, raising his hands, trying to summon that old, charismatic charm. "Everyone, please, listen to me. I am your director. I have dedicated the last 5 years of my life to building Silver Oak Estates. I would never, ever do anything to jeopardize this company. This is a targeted campaign to frame me." I watched his clumsy, desperate performance in absolute silence. A standard financial procedure. The sheer audacity he possessed to lie so blatantly right to my face in front of the people he was destroying. He really thought he could still talk his way out of this by blaming paperwork. I didn't even bother to argue with him. I simply reached back into the leather folder Arthur was holding and pulled out a single thin sheet of paper, stamped with the red seal of our Human Resources Department. I stepped forward and held the document high in the air for everyone to see. "You claim you don't know this woman, Julian," I said, my voice echoing like a death knell through the tasting room. "Then please explain this official appointment letter." The room fell completely silent. Everyone here has been wondering how a junior sommelier with absolutely zero qualifications felt entitled to ignore the dress code, berate senior staff, and openly threaten people with termination. Well, here is the answer. Miss Chloe here does not report to the tasting room manager. She does not report to HR. According to this document, she is listed as a special projects consultant, reporting directly and exclusively to the Chief Operating Officer. A low murmur of absolute disgust rippled through the crowd. The staff exchanged furious glances. "Julian, you didn't just steal money from this estate," I continued, my voice sharp and relentless. "You spat on the hard work, the integrity, and the dignity of every single person here. You used your authority to create a fake position, siphoning funds from our operational budget to pay for a mistress you paraded around our property. You turned my family's legacy into your own personal playground." Julian's face crumpled. He looked completely broken. "The signature is right here. Electronic, verified, and legally binding. Deny it now, Julian." He couldn't. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The final thread of his meticulously crafted lies had snapped, leaving him completely exposed. As the sole owner of Silver Oak Estates, I declared, my voice ringing with finality, "I am officially terminating Julian Cross from his position as Chief Operating Officer, effective immediately. He is stripped of all authority, all access, and all privileges on this property." Julian slumped forward, staring blankly at the marble floor. I had methodically stripped away every single layer of his false power, leaving him with absolutely nothing. I didn't need to say another word. I gave a sharp, definitive nod to the 2 security guards standing by the entrance. They moved in immediately, grabbing Julian by his arms and hauling him to his feet. Julian didn't even try to resist. All the fight, all the bravado had completely drained out of him. His head hung low, his shoulders slumped in absolute defeat as they half-dragged, half-walked him toward the heavy glass doors of the tasting room. As he was led away, the silence in the room finally broke. It was replaced by a rising chorus of hushed, contemptuous whispers from the very people he used to command. The image of the once dashing, untouchable director was gone forever. He looked exactly like what he was, a common criminal caught in his own trap. Off to the side, completely forgotten in the chaos, sat Chloe. She was still slumped on the marble floor where Julian had thrown her. Her heavy, expensive makeup was smeared and running down her face in dark, ugly streaks. The glamorous illusion she had built for her live stream was shattered into a million pathetic pieces. She looked around, her eyes wide with a new, terrifying realization. The dream of becoming the wealthy, powerful wife of the estate director was dead. And worse, she was now facing massive legal consequences for her part in this. She slowly reached for her phone, which was still recording, still broadcasting her downfall, and finally, desperately, swiped to end the stream. I turned away from her. And she wasn't worth another second of my time. I looked out over the crowd. The tasting room felt heavy with the lingering tension of the confrontation. The investors looked deeply unsettled, and the staff looked lost, their faith in the leadership of Silver Oak severely shaken. I knew I couldn't just leave them with this chaos. I needed to restore order. I needed to remind them of who we truly were. I stepped up onto the small raised platform near the center of the room, taking a steadying breath. To everyone here. I know this has been a profound shock, I began, my voice softening, carrying a deep, reassuring respect. The actions of one man do not define the soul of Silver Oak Estates. We cannot let the greed of one individual tarnish the tireless, honest work that hundreds of you pour into this soil every single day. I let my gaze sweep across the room, meeting the eyes of the workers, the sommeliers, and finally, Matteo, who was standing quietly in the back. However, we cannot move forward without a steady hand at the wheel, I continued. This estate needs a leader. We need someone who truly understands the value of our legacy, someone with unimpeachable integrity, profound talent, and a deep respect for both the wine and the people who make it. I turned my head, looking past the polished counters and expensive displays, toward the man who had silently walked up from the cellars during the commotion. That person is the man who quietly stood his ground today. The man who has dedicated his life to protecting the true heart of Silver Oak. I smiled, gesturing openly toward him. I am incredibly proud to announce that, effective immediately, mister. Lucas Thorne will step into the role of interim director of Silver Oak Estates. I have absolute confidence that with his unparalleled skill and his unwavering moral compass, Lucas will restore this estate to its rightful place. For a brief second, Lucas looked genuinely taken aback by my swift decision, but he quickly composed himself, his posture straightening. He walked slowly toward the platform, his presence radiating a quiet, grounded strength that Julian never possessed. As Lucas reached my side and bowed his head slightly to the crowd, the room erupted. It started with a few hesitant claps from the senior staff, and then quickly swelled into a thunderous, roaring ovation. The sound bounced off the glass walls, a wave of genuine relief and overwhelming support. The applause wasn't just for Lucas. When it was an endorsement of my decision, it was the sound of justice finally being served. The peace that finally settled over Silver Oak Estates was profoundly necessary, but it was just the calm before the tsunami. I had barely returned to the main house, exhausted to my bones from the transatlantic flight and the intense confrontation, when my phone started buzzing relentlessly. It wasn't just a few missed calls. It was an avalanche of notifications from social media and breaking news alerts. I opened my phone and my blood ran cold. A barrage of sensational, highly coordinated headlines were spreading like wildfire across every major platform. The articles featured maliciously edited photos of me and Lucas. They had taken innocent moments, us discussing soil samples, or Lucas handing me a glass of water after the chaos in the tasting room, and twisted them into something completely different. The headlines screamed, "Heiress caught in scandalous affair with winemaker, vicious wife stages, public coup to oust husband and seize total control, Silver Oak director framed by cheating wife and her lover." Someone had clearly taken the footage from Chloe's live stream and expertly doctored it. They had completely cut out the parts where she berated Matteo, where she threw wine on me, and where she bragged about Julian's power. They only left the brief clips of me looking stern, of Lucas stepping up to the platform, and of Julian kneeling pathetically on the floor, making it look like an ambush. And below these fabricated videos were thousands of vitriolic comments, obviously orchestrated by a massive troll farm. A look at her cold face. She's a monster. I heard she's been sleeping with that winemaker for years. This was just her excuse to steal the company from her husband. That poor guy. She completely ruined him just to get her way. I dropped the phone onto the oak table, a chill running down my spine. I had vastly underestimated Julian's sheer depravity. Knowing he couldn't possibly win on the actual facts, he had resorted to scorched earth tactics. He had clearly used whatever hidden slush funds he still had access to hire a black hat PR firm. He wanted to drag me down into the mud with him. He wanted to completely twist the narrative until I was the villain, destroying the pristine reputation of Silver Oak in the process. Arthur, my lawyer, walked into the room a few minutes later, his face grim. "Madam, the situation online is deteriorating rapidly," he reported, his voice tight with concern. "Our IT department has traced the campaign. It's a massive, coordinated attack, using thousands of bot accounts. They are flooding the estate's official pages and your personal profiles. The funds for the campaign were wired from an anonymous account. But I have no doubt it's the very last of the money Julian managed to hide." I sank into the armchair, massaging my throbbing temples. What does he want? Does he actually think this will get him his job back? "No," Arthur replied quickly. "He knows that's impossible. He wants to create enough public pressure to force you into a more favorable divorce settlement. Or, more simply, he just wants revenge. A cornered animal is incredibly dangerous." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to push past the exhaustion and think clearly. I will not negotiate with him, not for a single solitary penny. He chose to play dirty, and I will show him exactly what it costs to threaten this family's legacy. "What are your orders, madam? Should we disable the comments and issue a standard press release?" I shook my head, my resolve hardening into steel. No. The more we hide, the guiltier we look. Let them talk. The truth is, the only thing that actually matters, and gold is never afraid of fire. Arthur, arrange a formal press conference for tomorrow morning. Invite everyone. The major networks, the wine industry press, and especially the online tabloids that are currently slandering me. I will face them directly. The press conference was held the very next morning, right in the heart of our main barrel room. When the air was thick with the smell of aged oak and the frantic clicking of dozens of cameras, every major news network, wine industry publication, and online tabloid that had been slandering me the night before was packed into the room, desperate for the inside scoop on the billion-dollar scandal. I walked out from the back wearing a simple, sharp black blazer, my expression completely composed. Lucas walked right beside me, still wearing his practical work shirt, his presence as calm and grounded as ever. We sat down at the long wooden table lined with microphones. The room fell into a tense, suffocating silence. "Good morning, everyone," I began, my voice clear and steady. "I am Eleanor Vance. I have called this press conference not to defend my personal life, but to defend the honor and the legacy of Silver Oak Estates. Why the information currently circulating online is a malicious fabrication, coordinated with the sole intent to extort and defame." A reporter from a notorious gossip site immediately stood up, practically shouting his question over the others. "Ms. Vance, the public believes you and Mr. Thorne have been having a secret affair for years, and that you staged your husband's firing to clear the way for your lover. How do you respond to that?" The room held its breath. Before I could even lean toward the microphone, Lucas stood up. He didn't look at the reporter. He let his steady, piercing gaze sweep across the entire room. "I will answer that question," Lucas said, his deep voice commanding absolute attention. "Regarding the relationship between myself and Miss Vance, I can confirm that we are colleagues, partners in this estate, and friends. There is absolutely no illicit affair, as these cowardly rumors claim." He paused, taking a slow, deep breath. "However, I will not hide one truth. I have had deep feelings for Eleanor for 15 years, since the day we first worked the harvest together, through her marriage, and to this very day. It is a love born of profound respect, but I have never, not once, crossed the ethical line of a friend or an employee. I kept those feelings entirely to myself so that she could be happy. But today, seeing her slandered by a coward who nearly destroyed this estate, I can no longer remain silent." The entire press corps was stunned. No one expected a man as private and dedicated as Lucas to publicly confess a 15-year unrequited love just to shield the woman he cared for. The hostile murmurs completely died down, replaced by a sudden wave of genuine sympathy and respect. But we weren't done. Lucas signaled to Arthur, who was standing by a projector. A document flashed onto the large screen behind us. As for the real reason Julian Cross was fired, Lucas continued, his tone turning to pure steel. "This is the evidence we held back yesterday, hoping to grant him a final shred of human dignity. He has proven he doesn't deserve it." I took the microphone back. "What you see on the screen," I said, looking directly into the camera lenses, "is a forensic audit of the Silver Oak Employee Health and Welfare Fund, a fund specifically designed to provide medical care for our field workers, like Mateo, who have given their lives to these vines." Gasps rippled through the room as reporters leaned in to read the highlighted numbers. "Julian Cross did not just mortgage our land," I stated, my voice ringing with cold fury. "He systematically drained the medical fund of our most vulnerable employees to pay off massive gambling debts in Las Vegas. He stole health care from the people who work in the dirt so he could play high roller at the Bellagio. A man who abandons his own people like that has absolutely no right to speak of morality or to play the victim on the internet." The revelation was a knockout punch. It completely decimated public opinion. All suspicion against me vanished in an instant, replaced by a tidal wave of intense, visceral fury directed squarely at Julian. And then I delivered the final blow, the reverse trap. "Furthermore," I continued, my voice perfectly calm, "or the authorities have been notified regarding the assets purchased with these stolen operational funds. Every single piece of diamond jewelry and the brand new sports car that Julian gifted to his associate, Chloe. They were all purchased using the corporate accounts of Silver Oak Estates. Therefore, they are legally considered stolen company property. As of this morning, a court order has been issued to seize every last one of those items. She is currently being investigated for receiving stolen corporate assets." The press room erupted in a frenzy. The reversal was absolute. The man who tried to destroy my reputation was now exposed as a heartless thief, and the mistress who had thrown wine in my face was about to lose everything, right down to the necklace she was wearing. Now, with all of his hidden funds completely exhausted by the PR firm and his reputation obliterated, Julian was officially broke. The friends who used to fawn over him when he was a powerful director now conveniently ignored all his calls. He had literally nowhere else to turn. Desperate, cornered, and fueled by cheap alcohol, Julian remembered the lavish, expensive gifts he had showered upon Chloe. The diamond tennis bracelet, the Cartier watch, the keys to that brand new Porsche. In his twisted, panicked mind, he decided that since he had bought them, they were his property, and he had every right to take them back to sell and hire a lawyer. He showed up at her luxury condo complex, the one I had already placed a legal lien on, pounding violently on her heavy wooden door. When Chloe finally opened it, why, the look on her face wasn't one of a longing, devoted lover. It was pure, unfiltered contempt. She, too, was facing absolute ruin, fired from Silver Oak in disgrace, publicly shamed across the internet, and now facing a terrifying criminal investigation for possessing stolen assets. "What the hell are you doing here?" she sneered, blocking the doorway. "You came to leech off me. I'm about to get thrown out onto the street myself. Give me back the car keys and all the jewelry I gave you," Julian screamed, trying to aggressively push his way into the apartment. "It was my money. You have to give it all back to me." "Your money?" Chloe laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that echoed down the hallway. "That was the money you stole from the Workers' Fund. It is evidence now. Did you honestly think I was stupid enough to just keep it sitting around and go to federal prison with you? I sold it all this morning to pay for my legal fines." Hearing this, Julian completely snapped. The last shred of his sanity evaporated. He lunged wildly at Chloe, trying to grab her by the shoulders. But this time, she fought back. Like a cornered animal fighting for its life, she clawed viciously at his face, tearing his shirt, screaming at the top of her lungs. "You pathetic loser! You dare put your hands on me again, I will kill you!" she shrieked. A chaotic, violent brawl ensued right there in the hallway. The sounds of breaking furniture, shattering glass, and furious screaming alerted the neighbors, who immediately called 911. When the local police arrived, they found an incredibly pathetic scene. Julian and Chloe, their clothes ripped to shreds, faces bruised and bleeding, were still actively wrestling on the floor amidst the broken glass of a shattered vase. They were both immediately handcuffed, read their rights, and dragged out of the building. The very next morning, a highly unflattering mugshot appeared online. It showed Julian in handcuffs, his face swollen and scratched, sitting miserably next to a disheveled, tear-stained Chloe in the holding cell. The headline read, "Bitter End, Disgraced Director and Mistress Brawl Over Stolen Fortune." That one single photograph spread like wildfire across the internet, faster than any of their lies ever could. It was the definitive end of their pathetic little play. Seeing it, I didn't feel a single ounce of triumph or joy. I only felt a deep, profound pity, or for two lives completely and utterly destroyed by their own insatiable greed. The divorce proceedings moved with brutal, surgical efficiency. We sat in the stark, sterile courtroom of the Family Law Division. Julian sat across from me, looking completely hollowed out. Without the sharp suits and the arrogant swagger, he looked like a shrunken, entirely unremarkable man. Faced with an absolute mountain of undeniable evidence, from the financial audits to the security footage, Julian's private attorneys had practically begged him not to fight. The judge reviewed the files with open disgust. Within an hour, Julian was completely stripped of any claim to the Silver Oak estate. My lawyers successfully froze and seized all remaining joint assets to begin repaying the massive debts he had secretly accumulated. When the judge's gavel finally fell, Julian actually let out a long, shuddering breath. He looked almost relieved. He thought that by walking out of that courtroom with absolutely nothing, the nightmare was finally over. He thought the absolute worst thing that could happen to a man like him was simply losing his wealth and his title. That right there is the tragic, arrogant naivety of a true narcissist. They believe that because they only value money, losing it is the ultimate punishment. They completely fail to grasp the real, devastating weight of the law. A divorce court is a civil matter. It is merely the process of dividing property. It was just the opening act. It was just me cleaning my house. The real, inescapable hell opened up exactly 2 months later. This time, the courtroom wasn't dealing with family law. It was the Superior Court for Criminal Offenses. Julian was no longer just a disgraced husband. He was a criminal defendant, formally indicted on multiple felony counts of corporate embezzlement, massive wire fraud, and grand larceny. Because he was entirely bankrupt from the divorce and the ongoing asset seizures, not a single private law firm would take his case. He was forced to rely on a heavily overworked public defender, a tired attorney who had barely had 15 minutes to skim the massive stack of financial audits proving Julian had stolen millions from the Workers' Health Fund. I sat quietly in the back row of the gallery, watching the man I had once loved tremble as the prosecutor systematically dismantled his life. When he betrayed our marriage, he broke a promise to me, and for that, he lost his family. But when he deliberately and maliciously siphoned money from the medical fund of the very people who broke their backs in the sun to build his wealth, he crossed a line from which there is no return. He didn't just break a vow, he broke the law. He stole the livelihood and the safety of innocent people to fund a pathetic, shallow fantasy in Las Vegas. The judge did not offer an ounce of leniency. The sentence echoed like a gunshot through the silent courtroom. 20 years in federal prison. No possibility of early parole. I watched as the bailiff approached him, pulling his arms behind his back and clicking the heavy steel handcuffs into place. This wasn't just petty revenge. Revenge is a chaotic, emotional reaction. This was true, absolute justice. It was the profound, stabilizing realization that true power doesn't just crush those who hurt you. It uses the cold, unwavering weight of the law to ensure they can never, ever hurt anyone else again. 5 years passed. The Silver Oak Vineyards were bathed in the golden, warm light of an autumn sunset. The estate had not just recovered, it had thrived, becoming a true beacon of integrity in the valley. Lucas and I were standing on the private terrace. He walked over, holding a single dusty bottle of red wine. It was a private vintage, carefully cellared and completely untouched for exactly 15 years, the exact amount of time he had spent standing quietly in the shadows, protecting me. He poured a glass and handed it to me. His hands were still rough from the harvest, but his eyes were so incredibly gentle. This one finally reached its peak, Lucas said, his voice soft yet carrying the weight of a lifelong promise. It just needed time and the right season. I took the glass, smiling as the rich, deep aroma filled the cool air. I knew he wasn't just talking about the wine. I looked at the man who had been my steady anchor through the absolute worst storm of my life, and I finally allowed myself to truly anchor to him. Later that evening, as we drove down the long, winding gravel path toward the main gates, the valley was covered in a soft, ethereal mist. I was looking out the passenger window, and then I saw him. Standing alone on the side of the dirt road just outside the heavy iron gates was a man in cheap, oversized clothes. His hair was completely white, his shoulders hunched, his face deeply lined with a profound, irreversible regret. It was Julian. He had been released early on parole. He had absolutely nothing left. No family, no wealth, no empire. He was just a ghost, standing in the cold, staring into the bright, warm world he had so foolishly thrown away. Lucas slowed the car down slightly, his hands tightening on the steering wheel. I just looked at Julian for a fleeting second, and then I turned my head forward. I didn't ask Lucas to stop. I didn't even look back in the rearview mirror. The anger, the burning hatred, the deep betrayal, all of it was completely gone, replaced by nothing but the quiet breeze of the valley. "Keep driving," I whispered gently. The car glided smoothly through the evening mist, leaving the past exactly where it belonged. I realized then that the most perfect, absolute revenge is not spending your life tearing your enemies apart in hatred. It is washing the dirt from your hands, standing up and building a life so incredibly full of light that their darkness can never, ever touch you again.